Okay, so today's videos, or should I say video, is demonstrating how you would go ahead, go about, connecting to a RESTful API, which you have created using Maven. Now, I have my API running in the background and using the Postman application. If I send a GET request, this is the sort of information that's returning. Um, I have other API such as account and transaction. So this is kind of like what my API does. Okay, obviously your API will do different things, will return different data. It might be returning XML instead of JSON and so on. So you have to be aware of what your API is returning. Now, for this video, I am assuming that you know the basics of creating an API and how to go about creating different H, H, HTTP methods such as post methods, delete method, put methods, get methods, and so on. So for this tutorial, then we are assuming that you have an API working in the background and it's returning JSON data instead of XML. Right. So to get started, I'm going to create like some sort of a class which will handle which will have methods, uh, methods, static methods that I can use to make connection to the API or the web service for the client application. Okay, so in my client app, this is a Java Maven application. So I have created a class called REST connection. So this class here will have static methods which I will use to make connection to the API. So start it off now. Like I said, this tutorial is just to show you the basics of connecting to a RESTful API using Jersey client. So obviously, when you implementing this into your project, you will have to make some modification to actually suit your project, to suit your API and your client front end. So all the lines of code that you can see here won't always be applicable to your application. So you have to keep in mind, I know exactly which one do you need and which one you don't need, and what is the best way to actually connect to your API. Okay. Now in my API for the customers, I created a default method for login, and it's just a get method. And basically this method here, it takes a query parameter called email and password, and then it goes through the list of customers that I have in the database, and it checks to see if the email and password matches, and it returns that customer entity as the response. So for mine, obviously, if I'm using Postman, it will produce JSON instead of XML. If I'm using the web browser, this will produce XML instead of JSON. So as you can see, if I do that, you see it's producing XML here, but in Postman, it's producing JSON. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to create a method. Okay. So, we're going to create some methods in this class, in this REST client class, which will be static method that I can call without having to instantiate this class. And those static methods will return some sort of data that I can use in my application. So I have a GUI for login. Okay, this is my GUI for login. So it's taking the email and password, and then the user can sign in. So I want to be able to call the method that I'm going to create here, and that method then will have to return some sort of a customer information that I can use for my other classes. Okay, so what I did was, since this is a Maven Java application, what I did was I went into new and I said entity classes from database, and I just generated all the database tables that I have as entity classes for this project that I can use, which will make it much simpler for me to pass information from one GUI to another. So to get started, I'm going to create my first method, which will allow me to sign in. So this method then will return some sort of a customer element or a customer entity. So to get started, I'm going to say public static customer, and I'm going to call it sign in. So I'm going to call it sign in, and it's going to take into information a string email and a string password. So whenever I call this method, I need to always provide that particular information. Okay. Now the first thing that I need is the API route for my customer API. Okay, so this is mine there. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to save it into a local string variable. I'm going to call it string path, and I'm going to set that equal to that. Okay. Now, obviously, in my API, I have a specific path for the login, which is login. So I have to specify that here as well. So that's my path there. And then the next thing is we need to specify the Jersey API clients. Okay, so we want to say clients, and that's equal to clients. That's create, and then that will create the client. And then the next thing we need is the web resource. So web resource, and I'm going to call it target, and that's equal to client that's resource, and then we're going to specify the path as being a resource. And then the third thing that I need is the client response to get the response from the API. So client response, response, I'm going to call it response, and that's equal to target. So I'm going to say target, and first thing we want to do is send a query parameters. As you remember, my API requires a query parameters. So query param, and I'm going to specify email, and I'm going to pass email here. And then the next one is query param, and I'm going to specify a password, and I'm going to pass password here. Okay. And then the second last thing is that I want to be able to accept. That's my cousin. That's my little niece right there, screaming really, really loud. So the next thing is I want to make sure that this response accepts JSON and nothing else. So I want to say accept, and then I'm going to say application JSON. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is actually send the request. So it's going to be a get request. So we're going to send the request, and we're going to pass in client response class. And this should send a query to our web service, and then it should return some sort of response. Okay, so to get the response, I'm going to say string. I'm just going to save it into a string variable called entity. Okay, or response, whatever makes sense to you. And I'm going to say response dot get entity, and the entity will be of type class, string class. Excuse me. And then once I do that, I'm going to check to see what sort of a status the response returned. Obviously, the status code can be, between 200 and 400 and 204 and so on. So we are looking for a status number 200. So I'm going to check the response get status method to see which status codes we get. and we check to see if the status code is 200. If it's 200, then that means we have received a JSON object as a response or some sort of response, which means the web service was able to process a query and actually send us a result back. So we're going to say JSON object. Now I'm using the JSON object to convert the JSON object class to convert the response to a JSON object, right? As you can see here, this one returns like an array of JSON, but my login method only returns a JSON object, not an array. So I need to convert that using the JSON object. Okay, so I'm going to call it JSON, and that's going to be equal to new JSON object, and I'm going to pass the response, which is stored here, into that so that it can convert it into a JSON object. And basically this should be everything that you need. But obviously, as you can see, my method returns a customer type, okay? And my customer type has a constructor which takes in all this information, which the API returns. As you can see, address, customer number, email, phone name, and password. So I can just populate that in here since I have a JSON object. So to do that, I'm going to say customer C is equal to new customer, and then in the brackets I'm going to say, okay, JSON dot get int to get the integer, and the int will be customer number. Okay, the second one will be JSON dot get string, and then this will be full name. Okay, I'm following the way my constructor is specified, so the full name should be there, the address should be next, the email, and the password. Right, so full name will be there. Now all of these variables here, if you don't know much about JSON, all of these variables here are actually the key names in JSON response. Okay, so these are the key names and these are the values. Okay, so it's the key names that you specify, and the get method will get the value that you need for each of the key name that you specify. So if I specify key name customer number, it's going to go to customer num and get this particular value, which is 1. Okay, so moving on, so your JSON, let's get so after full name is address. So get address. After address, it's JSON that gets string, and this one will be email. And after email, then it's JSON that gets string, which is password. Okay, and then that will create the customer class that we need. Okay, and since this method requires a return type of customer, and since I have this variable here, I can just say return C. Okay, so that means we have return our customer element. Okay, and in the else statement for the if statement, so if the response is not 200, that means something must have gone wrong. Either we have no content or the server couldn't process our request. And then if that happens, we just return null. Okay, this way, whenever I call this method, I can check to see if it's either null or if it's not null. Okay, so that's your basic kind of get request. Okay, so let's test this into the login form. Okay, so in the login GUI, I have a sign in method. Okay, so in that sign in method, I'm going to call the sign in. Let me just close down all of these so that you can see exactly which menu I'm working on. Okay, so these two classes. So this is where my sign in method is, and this is where we're going to test it. So I'm going to create a customer. A customer variable here, and I'm going to instantiate it into a new customer here in the constructor. And then in my sign in method, okay, so in my sign in method, remember where I left this thing. Okay, in my sign in method, what I'm going to do is, now remember this is a static method, so that means in this class I don't need a constructor, I don't need to instantiate it. I can just say REST connection dot sign in method and then pass in the value, and then it will return a customer entity. Okay, so to do that, in the sign in method, I want to say customer, this guy here will be equal to, okay, equal to REST connection, okay, REST connection dot sign in. As you can see, it's giving me the option that sign in. Now I have two fields already, which is the email and the password. So I want to say email f dot get text, and then password f dot get text. So you get password. Now the thing about the get password method is that it returns a character array instead of a string. So I need to convert that into a string. So to do that, I need to pass it into a new string variable, as you see it there. Okay. So remember, the sign in method takes in two things: the email and the password. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. I needed a drink. Okay, so moving on, and once we call this method, now we need to check to see if this guy is either null or if it has something in there. So we do an if statement. So if customer is equal to null, then we just use some sort of a pop-up box like JOption pane, and we say show message dialog, and we just tell the user that login was unsuccessful. So we say login was unsuccessful, and then if it's not null, then that means we did log in. So we say, now I have a main menu here where the user account and information will be stored and displayed and so on. Okay, so I am gonna just instantiate that for the sake of it. Okay, I'm gonna say main menu main equal to new main menu, and I'm gonna say main dot set visible it's true, and I'm gonna get rid of the login page, and I'm gonna do that by saying dispose. Okay, so I have my API running in the background. Okay, so let's go ahead and test the login. Okay, so running the application. So this is my login screen. Now, as you can see, I have an account here. Okay, I have two accounts, two customer accounts, and I'm gonna try using this email address and this password. Okay. Now, obviously, this is not my real password. Okay, so we're gonna try email and this password is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then we do a sign in, and as you can see, everything's signed in. Now, it opened up the main menu because customer wasn't null. Customer had information. That's why it went there. Okay. So if I run this again but enter the wrong information, you see what's going to happen. So because if we enter the wrong information, it should say that the customer is null. So I'm just going to type something really random and try again. And then as you can see, nothing happens because we received an error from the client saying that the response returned a status of 204 no content. Okay, so 204 no content, it's not 200, so that means even though the API process I request, it still returns something that had no content. So that means we didn't have anything there, right? Now to catch the no content, so to catch the no content, you just have to have this if statement here. So saying things like else if status is true or false, that means no content, and we return null as well. Okay. So since we make that change, let's just test it again quickly before we move on to the post method. And we say again, try that. Now, as you can see, nothing happens again because we're getting an error from the clients. Okay. And then this is just a warning that's telling us. Okay. So that case, then you know exactly what's going to happen. Okay. So in our login, so if the customer is null, then this should print out. And if it's not, then it will open up the menu GUI, the main menu GUI. And using the REST connection sign in, we are able to send a GET request into our client. Okay. Now, if you want to actually display the the content that you received, for example, the customer. So I'm just going to have this here, and I'm going to create setter method for that. So setter method. And basically, once I get the setter method, then I have some labels here, which I can display information, okay, that I've received from the service. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say name L, that's the name of it. So name L, let's say text, and it's going to be customer dot get full name. Just going to duplicate this two more times, and I'm going to say email L and address L. And let's get email, get address. Okay. Trying this again one more time. Closing this old one. Typing in the password and signing in, and then bam, we get this, and we don't update. Oh, all right. Oh yeah, I know why. Sorry, I forgot to call it. Okay, so the fact that the main menu now has a method called set a customer. So when we actually do login, okay, which is here, I can actually call that method. I can say main set customer, and I'm just passing the customer in there, and then it will know what to do with the customer. Okay, so signing in again. Sign in, and there we go. So we have the information about the customer, and if you look in the API there, you see I use this customer here. So the email is there, the street is that one there, or the address, whatever, and then the full name is that one there. Okay, so that's how you do your GET request. So let's go ahead and make a post request. Okay, so for the post request, I will be using this one here. Okay, so I'm going to be using this menu here that I've created. So this menu has the 4 things that I need: the full name, email, password, and address. And then I have other things like creating an account and stuff like that, but we don't have to worry about that just yet. Okay, so going back to our class that we created for the REST connection, we're going to add a new method. Okay, and then this method will allow us to send a post request. Now I want to create a method which will be kind of a general method that you can use for any sort of post request. Okay, so I'll show you an example. Okay, so I have three classes here. Okay, I want to be able to create like one post request method that can send any of those classes as a parameter into it. Okay, this one only returns the customer. But I want this one, okay, to return. I want the post method to return a boolean between true or false, letting us know if we actually succeeded in sending the post request or not. So to do that, creating a method called public static boolean, okay, because we want true or false, and I'm going to call it send post request. Okay. Now, in this method, I want to be able to send any type of object. So to do that, I'm just going to say pass in object as a parameter. It doesn't matter what kind of object it is. Okay. And the second thing that I want is I want to be able to pass in a particular API path. Okay. The API path then will be whatever API we want. This one has a fixed API path, so that means whenever we call this, it's always going to send the request to this path. But I want this one to send a request to any path that we've specified, so I'm going to use this one instead of a fixed one. Okay, and then so in the method, we're going to again create a client. Okay, and then we're going to create the web resource. We'll call it target again. Target equal to client.resource, and we're going to pass in the API path as the resource. Okay, because this API path will vary depending on our object that we're sending. So you can use this to send requests to for creating new customers, or creating new accounts, or creating new transaction. Okay, so it makes it more efficient than having like three different type of post request method. And then client's response. Okay. Actually, before we move on to the client's response, now since we're sending a post method, now my JSON my API accept JSON JSON data as a parameter, right? So that means I need to create the JSON JSON object create the JSON object, then convert it into a string, and then send that string as a parameter into our request. Okay, so I'm gonna call it parameter, and maybe make it shorter. I'm just gonna call it param, and then this will be equal to a new. Okay, will be equal to a new JSON object, and then I'm gonna pass object into it. Okay, and then I'm gonna convert it to string, so that it's gonna take this object, convert it into a JSON, and then convert that into a string, and then save it into the parameter. Okay, and just for security testing purposes, I'm going to print it out to myself so I can see the parameters. Out, and I'm going to say param, so that I can see that from my side, like what kind of JSON parameter is being sent. And then let's say post param, okay. And then I'm going to create the client's response, and I'm going to call it response, and that's equal to the target dot. Now, since I'm going to be sending JSON data, okay, as a post request, I need to say, okay, So first thing first is that I'm just going to specify that it's going to accept JSON as a result. So we accept application / JSON as a response, and also we send a type of application JSON as a parameter, right? And then we're just going to send a post, and then in the post, then we're going to use the client's response class and our parameters. Okay, I think I spelled that. Client response. There we go. Okay, and then this will send a post request. Now my API post request, let's say post request for the customer, is a void type, so that means it returns no content. Okay, so the response that we have to listen for this one is 204 because it returns no content. So to do that, we need to have an if statement. Okay, we're going to say if response dot get status is equal to 2 or 4, then we can return true, saying that we did actually make a post request into our web service, and the web service was able to process the request. Okay, but if the web service was unable to process the request, then it won't be a 204 anymore. It's something else. So we want to return false here. Right? And that's it. So this method here will allow you to send post requests using different objects. So you can send an object of customer, account, or transaction, as long as you specify the correct API path for that request. Okay. Now to get this done, so we go into our register screen. We go on the create method. Okay. Now I already have some path specified. Okay. So this is for the customer path, and this is for the account path. So if you want to create a new account, we use this path. If you want to create a customer path, we use this path. Okay. Now to get started. Okay. So to create a new customer, so to basically I'm going to be sending this object here as a response in that method. Okay. So to do that, I'm going to first get the information. Remember, I have 4 fields. So I'm going to say customer. I'm just going to give it C as a short name. It's going to be new customer. Okay. It's going to be new customer, and then I'm going to call the set method. I'm going to say c.set full name, and then that will be equal to full name f that gets text. Okay, and that's like uppercase N. There we go. Full name f that get text. So c.set email. That will be email f that get text. C.set address, and then this will be address f that get text. Remember, these are the names of the fields that I have here. Okay, so this is full name, this is email f, this is password f, this is address f. Okay, and then I'm going to say c.set password, and then this will be equal to new string. As you remember, the password field returns a character array, so we need to convert that into string. So I'm going to say password f get password. Okay, so that's the 4 things that I need. Okay, and then since I have all those done, I'm going to call the method that we created, the send post request method. Okay, So before I do that, I'm going to create a Boolean variable to hold the value that this method returns, okay, either true or false. So I'm going to say Boolean status, okay, to check to see what's the status with the request. That's equal to REST connection dot send post request, okay. And then for the object, then it's going to be C, okay. C will be the object, and for the path, it's going to be customer path, okay. And then this will send a post request to our API, okay. So we can send either customer account or a transaction as a parameter for this method here. And then we're going to check to see if status is true or false, okay. So if status is equal to true, then this means that we created a new account. Else it means that we didn't. So else we're going to say j option pane show message dialog. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say sorry, we couldn't process your request, right? Okay, so now the way I did mine is that I also have a field called account type. So basically this screen does two things. It creates the customer and it also creates the account, okay? So that means I need to send two post requests in this process here, okay? Now to do that, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix it up a little bit, okay? So first I'm going to send a post request to create a new customer. If this returns true, I'm going to send a get request to get that customer, okay? Then another post request to create the account, okay? So to do that, so this one will create the customer, and if the customer is created, then I'm going to call it get request. Okay, so I'm going to say now C. So I'm just going to overwrite this guy, okay? That's what I'm going to do, okay? I'm going to override him. So I'm going to say C is equal to, okay, REST connection dot sign in, okay? And if you remember, this takes in the username and password. So I'm going to take in, let's say, I'm actually going to make this variable just out here. I'm going to call it string password. I'm going to put that there so that I can use it easily. So put that there, and I'm going to say password will be here, and then email will be here. I'm going to say email field get text, okay, and then this should get the customer information, right? It's going to get the customer information, and then what I can do is I want to say if C is not equal to null, okay, so that means the customer actually the customer did sign in, so register correctly, and his information have been pulled back. I can say account and new account. I just want to say account is equal to new account. Okay, so this time we're sending an account request. Okay, so first we send a post request for the customer, creating a new customer. We check if it was created. We send a sign-in request to get the customer, which is a get request. And if we get the customer, we create a new account, and then we send the post request for that. Okay, so I'm going to say account. Now, just for the purpose of speeding up here, I am just going to follow this quickly. So I'm going to say that. Okay, so I'm going to say account will set the balance, account set the date we created, account set the customer. Okay, so the customer will be C, and then account, set the sort code for that account, and then account, set the type of account. Now I have a drop down called account type. Okay, so I'm getting the selected item from that to set the type of account that we're creating. And then once we do that, then we send a post request. Okay, so I'm going to check, I'm going to create a Boolean variable which will check the account status. So account status is equal to REST connection dot send post request, and this time we're sending account as the post request, and then the path for that then will be the account path. And then this will send the post request to create the new account, and then I can check to see if the status was true or false. So if it was true, that means we managed to create the account. If it was false, that means we didn't create the account. Okay, so I'm going to say J option pane show message dialog saying that, you know, accounts have been created or has been created. Has been created. Okay, and then we can say, you know, please log in. Please log in. And then what we do is we send them into the login screen. So we go login form, and login is equal to new login form, and login set visible is equal to true, and then we dispose this. So say this dot dispose gone. Right? And if the account is not created, you know, obviously it prints the user saying that the account wasn't created. So you say J option then, sorry, account wasn't created. Created. Okay, so now that we have the register done, let's go ahead and test it out. So we're going to create a new account. In my API, I only have 2 accounts, so I'm creating a third one using a different email. Okay, and then we're going to say, oh, sorry, I need to go to new account. A new account. Okay, and we're going to give it a name. Actually, we'll give it a different name. Kevin Spacey. I'll give it a password as well, and then the address. Oh, Spacey's way. And then we're going to create a current account instead of, like, you know, saving whatever. And then I'm going to say create, and then there we go. It says accounts have been created, please log in, and then send us to the login screen. And if I refresh this, then you see we have a third account, Kevin Spacey account that we just created there. And then if we check the, sorry, this is the third customer, and if we check the account, then you see the accounts matching Kevin. Okay, so in the accounts, then you see account number 3. Okay, and this one belongs to the new guy that we just created. Okay, so that's how you send a post request into your API, and we can actually log in with that. So Spacey at gmail.com and sign in, and then you see we have all of that information there. Right? So that is pretty much the basics of how connecting to your API. Now, obviously, you can modify your API, so that uh, you can have like custom methods and stuff like that. Well, basically, this will be the way to send a request. Now, you can do the same as well for the put request, depending on how your API is set up. Now, my API is set up in a different way. So every time I send a put request, okay, when I send a put request, I need to specify an ID, okay, which matches that particular account, okay, and it has to be in form of a parameter. So meaning that all my post requests has to follow that particular order. Okay. So to have a put request or to send a put request for updating your account and stuff like that, right? The same like the post request. So public static boolean. Okay, we say send put request, and like I said, my API requires three things. Okay, my API requires three things for the put. Well, sorry, my API requires an ID for the put request to identify the particular entity that you're trying to update. Right? It requires the ID and also the entity that you're updating. Okay, so to do that, you need to send three things. Okay, so the first thing will be object. Again, this method will allow you to use any of these entities, like this, or this, and use this one method to update that entity. Okay, and the second thing will be the string API path. Then the third thing will be integer ID, which is the ID that the API requires. Okay, so again, this will be the same. So you're gonna have your client, okay, and you're gonna have your web resource. Obviously, your web resource have to match your API. So mine requires a path, so it's gonna be plus that, and then plus the ID that it requires. Okay, remember, the ID has to be in the form of a path parameters, not query parameters or form parameters. Okay, so to specify a path, we just put it after the slash, and then the ID will go there, and then you will have your string entity. Okay, so string parameter param is equal to new JSON object, and the object will go here, and then that'll be toString, and then we're going to say client response is equal to target dot. Again, it will accept application JSON, and then it will send, okay, data in the type of application JSON, and then we're going to send a put request, okay, and we're going to use the client's response class, and we're going to send the parameter along with that. Okay, just need to respell that. So object, and again, the put request, as you can see, is a void type. That means we need to check for the 204 errors or the true or false status. Okay, so just the same as this one, you just use that to check if it's 204 now, and then return either true or false. Okay, so that's how you're going to go about using your put request. Okay, Now, obviously, I don't have any sort of a area, right? I don't have an area that I can test this at the moment. But basically, when you're testing this, you're going to call this method, you're going to pass your entity, you're going to pass the path for your API, then you're going to pass the ID of the entity here, okay? So, for example, if we were updating the customer, okay? So this method will be in this particular form, okay? So when you call the send put, so the first thing that you send will be a customer object, okay? This will be the path, okay? Whatever the path is. Let's say, for example, my path is this one here, okay? That's my path for the customer. So the path will be here, okay? So that's your path. And then for this, for the ID, then it's going to be, you know, customer that gets whatever the ID is. So my one is called get customer ID, like that. Okay. So when you call your method, this is how you're going to call it. Okay. And you can use this for any of those three entities to update. Now remember, this method will allow you to update the entity that you already have in the database. Okay. So I hope this video somehow helps you in some way. Uh, if you do have any questions, please leave, you know, all your questions below, and I'll try my best to answer them. Obviously, to use things like the JSON object class, you need to have the org.json library or dependencies into your project. To use the client class, which is the Jersey API class, you need to have the com.son.jersey API client dependency or library into your project. So make sure you have those dependencies set up before you can actually use them. Otherwise, you're going to be using the wrong imports. And if you use the wrong imports, you won't be able to, you know, call the appropriate methods. Okay, guys, that is all for me. I hope this video helps in some way. Until the next time.